what had happened with 2020 was there were tons of these areas that now could freelance. And so if the effective pool tripled, which is going to create pressure for supply and demand. But the moat was many of these places did not have native English speakers. ChatGPT changed that. It made every single person on the planet a native English speaker.
Today, we have Lucas Fisher on the show. Lucas and I got connected fairly recently, and I was super excited to have him on here because he's kind of in a season of change. And we don't often hear about these kinds of stories whenever we're, looking at people in the space, but being able to pivot and being able to kind of like look for the right signals so that way we can stay on the path is a very important part of the skill set of being a founder and staying at the forefront of things. And so we're going to kind of dive in, talk to him about kind of what he was doing before this and what he was seeing as far as the writing on the wall and kind of how he's approaching his pivot. Lucas, can you kind of talk a little bit more about the work you were doing before you decided to kind of make a change?
Yeah. So I won't give you the whole long backstory, but I ended up committing to copywriting, like direct response copywriting as a skill set that I wanted to master kind of early on in my entrepreneurial journey. And so I built a freelance business out of that, private clients, consulting, that type of thing. And then about halfway through that journey, I had a kind of demand foisted on me to mentor junior copywriters. And so I created a mentorship program, separate company for all of that. And that was my kind of dual track through the last decade. That went really well. It was a great lifestyle personal business. I created a lot of great results for people, both on the personal side and on the mentorship side. But right around the 2022 timeframe, both prior to ChatGPT and then after ChatGPT originally launched, the world of direct response copywriting and specifically freelance copywriting, training junior writers, that type of thing, was a directly impacted industry very heavily by AI. And it was also already an industry under strain from 2020 and a lot of the stuff that happened as a result of the pandemic and people going remote and a lot of worldwide global jobs opening up even more so than they previously were. So that was an inflection point at my life and career where both of my primary businesses were directly affected by a huge technological change. And so I played with it for a little while to see how I could like pivot around in that space, but ultimately decided that after basically one last hurrah in 2023, that it was time to shut both of those down because the nature of the business was not something I was willing to pivot into in that specific industry. And so since the end of 2023, I've essentially been taking a lot of the skill sets and a lot of the systems and a lot of the learning that I've had from that career into a few new spaces. AI is one of them. So there's a lot of systems and implementation and integration around AI stuff that is coming out of my industry because the work still needs to get done at the end of the day. But also there's opportunities around the higher level skills like messaging and storytelling and understanding target markets, demographics, psychographics, behavior graphics, all that stuff, and applying them to new industries. So I'm in that phase where I'm trying to take stock of everything that I've been able to do and apply it in different areas and see what best fits me, what best fits the goals that I have for my life, and kind of how to navigate the sea change.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Totally. Right.
Cool.
I mean, enough for people who were listening with intention anyway. Right. So I have some questions around this. Was there, I met this guy one time very, very early on in my journey, and he ran a graphic design agency, right? And it was so funny because he wasn't doing graphic design anymore. And I said, "Hey, what caused you to change?" And he was like, "I can tell you exactly the day." And I was like, "Okay, what happened?" And he's like, "We were doing stuff for Blockbuster. And the head of marketing for Blockbuster called me with questions about Adobe. and I knew that I was on borrowed time, right? If the
Yeah.
head of marketing is going to call me to ask about the tools that we're using, we're not really going to have the realm of providing value and being able to keep these customers. So for you, was there like a specific day? Was there a specific moment in time to where, you were like, okay, I got to go do something else? Or was it just like a gradual build up?
Um, I think it was a series of moments. Um, so there wasn't one single inflection point, but there were several huge events that cumulatively kind of led me to the decision, right?
Hmm.
Some of them were personal, but a lot of them were industry based. And so I think the first one was there was a launch of a precursor software that was using GPT-3, so OpenAI's model prior to launching in the ChatGPT like
Hmm.
user or software module, like public facing module. And this was all API stuff. So it was SaaS, it was normal software, but it was using the GPT large language model, and it was called Conversion.ai. And they've changed the name a couple times, but it was the first GPT based copywriting software.
Hmm.
Everything else had been kind of like this algorithmic Mad Lib style software, right?
Yeah.
Where they had to program it with all sorts of templates and all sorts of stuff, and it was essentially just plug and play. So you still had to be a copywriter in order to use it effectively. It
Hmm.
was not usable by an average person, um, and and so that put like the radar up. Essentially, it was like, okay, this is actually a generative software, and I'm seeing where it's going, and I'm seeing what I'm capable of doing it as an expert copywriter and all of that. So what I did was immediately pivot into training my junior writers using the tool. It's because I had
Okay.
the mentorship program. I was like, okay, everybody I'm training is getting a seat in this software because I'm bought into the fact that this is going to be industry changing. And that was 2021. Um, so I ended up being like the single largest non-enterprise user of that software because all of my mentees had a seat for a
Hmm.
year, and so I actually got to like talk with that company and help develop some of their tech and their training and all that type of stuff because of the user base.
Yeah.
But I felt like, okay, cool. This is the direction to go. This is good stewardship of my mentees because I'm teaching them the tools they need to do their job, right? Like
Yeah.
if I was a graphic designer, it would be teaching them Adobe. Um, Same thing. And then ChatGPT hit and opened it up everything. It was a free software that was usable. And everybody looked at it like, oh crap, I can just type write me an email and this will write an email. And it's like better than what I can do.
Hmm.
I think that was an important point for the consumer, especially because most copywriting clients are not copywriting experts. And so when they see a software that can write better than them, the delta between the copywriter being better than them and then the software being better than them, they can't see the gap between the software and the copywriter.
Oh yeah.
They just see both things being better and one of them is free.
Hmm.
Um, so that was important, but that wasn't actually the inflection point of the ChatGPT point. The inflection point for me with ChatGPT was that it unlocked a um, previous historical moat between the native English speaking copywriters and the non native English speaking copywriters that
Huh.
existed from 2020 all the way up to when ChatGPT was launched. What had happened with 2020 was, and these numbers I'm pulling from my head, but I had actually pulled them at the time. So forgive me if they're a little bit wrong or if they've changed, but effectively the pool of freelance copywriters available for hire tripled in 2020 due to people going remote,
Hmm.
getting laid off, going
Oh
remote,
yeah.
but
Okay.
also global, like freelance in the global south, freelance in some of the East Asian country, like Pakistan. There were tons of these areas that now could freelance.
Hmm.
And so if the effective pool tripled, which is going to create pressure
Oh yeah.
for supply and demand, right? But the moat was many of these places did not have native English speakers. And so there was still like that edge
Hmm.
that someone who spoke native English would be able to, serve the English speaking market, which was by and large the largest copywriting market for freelancers.
Hmm.
ChatGPT changed that. It made every single person on the planet a native English speaker. And
Hmm.
because of their inherent capability of translating from other languages or taking broken or substandard English and translating it into native sounding,
Hmm.
that inflection point eliminated the advantage that native English speakers had overnight, and therefore truly created a massive amount of pressure against the freelance copywriters at the junior and intermediate level.
Interesting.
So those two things were the really, really big industry-wide global changes where I was like, okay, something has fundamentally changed in the business model of both freelance copywriting and ethically training freelance copywriters.
Yeah.
Because I can no longer say that this is like, if you buy my program, then within a certain amount of time, you will be good enough to charge XYZ rates because that's the going rate for the level of skill that you're going to come out of this program with. In the
Hmm.
same way that coding boot camps were able to put people into, junior
Yep.
coder roles, same thing. So at the same time, my freelance career and the mentorship program hit very, very large industry changes. And so those were the two primary inflection points. And I had ultimately, like I said in the beginning, decided to shut down both of them at the end of 2023 just because things were moving much faster than even I anticipated. So
So okay.
that was a
um
lot, but
No,
those
yeah,
were the
no,
two.
I appreciate that. And I'm a copy nerd, right? I don't put myself out there as a copywriter, but I think every salesperson after they have the ability to converse well should be thinking about how to write well, right? Because of emails and follow-ups and all these things. So I've been studying it for a long time and I really appreciate it. And what's funny is as you're talking about this and the mode and everything, there's a guy that I follow on LinkedIn. His name's Brooklyn Nash. Shout out to Brooklyn Nash. He runs a content marketing group agency, and he did this experiment, right? And he got someone from Fiverr, or one of the commodity kind of places to go find help and gigs and stuff like this, versus just regular GPT. But then he also had one of his high level copywriters also take a swing at the same brief and the same kind of situation. And what was flooring to me, because I was seeing everyone kind of go around and be like, well, look, I hired this person off of Fiverr and look what GPT can do, right? And they were drawing this kind of false comparison, right? Because mastery is, you know, in rare supply, I think in any lane, but it was very apparent, right, in these three examples about the difference between the commodity copywriter, the GPT, copy, and then this higher level master of their craft copywriter, right? Now, ultimately, you and I could geek out about that for like days, right? But it does really just give everyone who like doesn't want to see any value in paying for good copy a very easy way to like think that they don't have to invest in it at all, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think that that's, to be I go really deep on this stuff. So
Please,
so
yeah,
we don't
that's why
have to
you're
make
here.
this a copywriting podcast, but the but I think that point is important because there's a level of nostalgia or taste making that comes from someone who cares about the craft enough to study it
Yeah.
and to get really good at it, right? And so somebody who is like, I'll put myself in this realm of like a person who has mastered the craft and continues to care about the craft, where we look at tools that are making things faster and we see the gap between like what was possible and what is currently capable, but versus what like we could do as a master, as an expert or
Hmm.
whatever, right? But I also think that that is a huge um handicap
Hmm.
because because the truth is, especially with copywriting, this isn't true of art, but this is true of copywriting. Ultimately, the only purpose of copywriting is to convince and persuade a person to take an action.
Yeah.
That's it. And so if a person takes an action, copywriting worked. There is a checkbox to it.
That's
So good
fair.
copy
Yeah.
versus bad copy is a quantitative thing, not a qualitative thing.
Hmm.
But when we are experts about it, we look at it from a qualitative lens, like, dang, that is really good copy, right? And
Yeah.
we'll appreciate good copy. But the reality is it's much more mercenary than that. Good copy is getting a click. Good copy is sending someone to the direction that you designed for it.
Hmm.
And the thing that I noticed about it was good enough copy is what the vast majority of people need, and good enough copy comes out of the AI much faster and much cheaper
That's
than
fair.
they can write it themselves or that they could hire a person for. And that time delta is much more valuable because, in general, copywriting is a numbers testing game.
Mm.
So you can have an excellent copywriter, and I've seen this. I've seen head to head. I've seen top copywriter names. Like, I'm not going to name them, but if you have studied copywriting, you will know their name.
Hmm.
Um, Go head to head against a AI written sales letter and lose. Like, not they did a little bit better than the AI, but the AI wrote better than them. And it's not because the AI is a quote unquote better writer or knows more, although eventually it will have the
Sure.
entire corpus of every ad that ever worked and the ability to change. It's
Yeah.
the speed to testing the copy, to getting the click or not getting the click. It's the speed, and it's always been the speed. But now AI is just infinitely faster than any person could be.
Hmm.
So even though a person who's an expert at copywriting will objectively write better copy that is more palatable to a person reading it and could potentially make an argument for a long-term like relationship with the customer being more valuable than the short-term click, at the end of the day, the vast majority of businesses only care about the speed, the click, and the mercenary nature of the copy. And so
That's fair.
um, that is actually like the big principle based thing that I saw um, before ChatGPT ever launched. I was
Hmm.
like, crap, that's why this software is important. Okay, ChatGPT just made everybody a native English speaker. Okay, I need to shut this down because it is not ethical for me to teach a junior writer and say you could have a career in this because your role as a junior has been removed.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to pay you to learn anymore. You have to get good enough to justify intermediate advance rates, and you're going to have to do that on your own. And I can't charge a high ticket curriculum product with the understanding that you're going to have to go off and do another 2-3 years of unpaid labor to get good enough to actually charge for it.
Hmm.
And so I guess again, long tangent, but that was the thought process behind it, and kind of the difficult thing for me to accept as a person who had dedicated that lane. Like, I will be an expert copywriter. That is my craft, and I know that there's value there. To realizing that the craft was really more mercenary than I wanted to admit, and I felt kind of elitist about it until I got to the point of going, oh crap, like
Hmm.
I can write a better email than this, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, right. Because I would, going back to the concept of testing, I would imagine that the first run on any high level copy person is probably going to outperform the GPT, but the GPT is just going to be able to iterate and make it better so much faster.
Mhm.
So all these people like actually have the opportunity to be data driven, right? I think a lot of
Yeah.
people like to run with the data driven idea, but they're still just based upon their own personal preference and stuff like that, as opposed to looking at just the data
Mhm.
in a complete set.
Look up the difference between like regular intelligence versus swarm intelligence or swarm
Interesting.
tactics.
Okay.
Um, from both a mathematical and like chaos theory kind of stuff, but also just a like a computer science type thing.
Mhm.
The way a swarm interacts with a problem is much different than a regular intelligence with a mode. And so the way they approach the problem is different. But when you understand a swarm, you understand how these problems are solved by these AIs. It is a brute force thing,
Mhm.
which is not as efficient as an intelligence thing. But because of how fast and how cheap it is, the swarm always works.
Hmm.
If that,
Uh,
yeah, they can. That's a rabbit hole to go down.
well,
But
it's so fascinating because like I keep, you know, I keep thinking about my lane, right? And I see everyone on LinkedIn and Facebook talking about, hey, AI is coming for all sales jobs and everything. And part of me is like, well, you know, maybe not, but I'm also, after this conversation, kind of aware that, like, because I do treat this as a craft and I do put a lot of time and effort into it, my appreciation of it is going to be different, right? But at the end of the day, it is about conversion. Like, what is going to convert the highest overall inside of a business? So I'm gonna have to kind of like sit with that and kind of make sure that I'm not trying to gatekeep,
Hmm.
my lane out of some weird get off my yard mentality and stuff like that, right? I'm gonna have to spend some time thinking about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
So, going from being excited about this AI tool and being able to kind of help people quicker and everything else like this, to realizing that, like, there is no more edge. There's nothing worth hanging out here for and everything. Can you talk a little bit about, like, how did you process that? Were you depressed? Did you want to, like, set the whole world on fire? Was there a mode of like, okay, cool, I'm just going to become a prompt engineer and teach people how to prompt and stay in this lane? Like how did you get to the place to where you were okay, like, putting it away?
that's a great question. Yeah, I had about a 6-month period of existential crisis, uh, which I can break down in as much detail as you want, but it might not be interesting to everybody listening. But about 6 months of an existential crisis, not just about me as a copywriter and the businesses that I had, but like truly extrapolating out the if this, then that of what was happening and getting to a point of like, crap, if this continues on the trend that I extrapolate it to continue on, it's not just copywriting, it's intelligence. It's not just intelligence, it's what we as people do productively with intelligence. And you kind of go down, a like, what is purpose? What is life? What is the value of work versus what we're here to do kind of rabbit hole. And again, not for this podcast, but I sat with that for 6 months, and I said earlier on, like, some of the decisions were industry for shutting down my stuff, others were personal. I was also going through a personal transformation during that time frame,
Hmm.
and to cut it super short, it's that the thing that pulled me out of the existential crisis and started getting me thinking a little bit more in the moment about what was going on was also the thing that helped me deal with the personal stuff, which is to say, you have to find out who you are beneath the labels and the roles that you've put on yourself.
Oh yeah.
And so many people define themselves by the label and then have a crisis when the label's gone. And
Hmm.
you see this with elite performers. The Olympics are going on right now. Many, many gold medalists will be depressed in the next couple weeks
Oh yeah.
because they won. And now what? Or that was their last Olympics. They're not an Olympian anymore. They're a
Hmm.
gold medal Olympic athlete and they're 32 years old. And now what? Right?
Yep.
And that type of thing happens to people who achieve. It also happens to people who identify with a label and then see that label taken from them.
Hmm.
So maybe they're not the achievement-minded person who has the rug pulled when they reach the top, but maybe they're the person who just wants to live a life and that life is no longer available or no longer the way that they expected it to be.
Yeah.
And when you're going through an existential crisis from a professional perspective and an existential crisis from a personal perspective, I had the benefit of having all of my labels stripped away from me almost at the same time or within a short window.
Hmm.
And I had to find out what's left, what is still there when it's just Lucas sitting by himself.
Yeah.
And not to get too woo woo, but there is something there. And I think everybody finds out that there is something there. They find out it doesn't have a label. If you want to call it your name, if you want to call it something else, you can pick one of the philosophies or
Hmm.
religions or spiritualities or whatever, but there is something there. And when you recognize that even without anything, there's still something, you can move forward with a level of peace that allows you to play with the circumstances of your life.
Yeah.
And that answers the question of like, how do you pull out of it? But it doesn't answer the question of like, what's next, because it's a hyper individual question. But
Mhm.
it, that the answers come to the individual that finds that piece, because now they're not looking at it through the lens of, okay, I'm a copywriter, but AI just took my job, right? Okay, I'm a salesperson. They're saying AI is going to take my job, and now I'm worried. Um, it's more of, this is who I am at a core,
Yeah.
um, and what is that core drawn to? What are the interesting things? What are the what's the value I add with just existing? Um, and yeah, like I said, could go a little woo woo with that, but that's how
I,
I pulled it out.
I don't think that's woo-woo at all. Like I think I got to do uh man, this is such an interesting kind of thing that I'm realizing as we're talking about it. Like a big part of the sales coaching that I was a student in for a very long time was about separating your identity from your role. You know, And, my coach was always like, "Hey, man, you can have a bad day as a salesperson, doesn't make you a bad human," right? And I was wearing all my failure, like, so heavily, right? I was in my first kind of, like, field sales role, struggling and failing. I was working a second job, and, it just kind of felt like everything was kind of falling apart. Now, thankfully, like, coaching I built some walls and some detachment between these things and everything, and that's one of the things I gotta help people with is, like, you can have the best price and the best product and still not win the deal, right? So you can't hang your value on your ability to convert, and that took me a long time. But then it was fascinating because during COVID, right, I was struggling just like every other small business. I had to do a whole version of that again, right? Because a lot of the kind of trappings around my identity had shifted a little bit, right? I'd left my martial arts school, struggling to figure out the business. I'm writing my book and doing all these things. And it was weird because it was like doing that again purposefully at like a much deeper level than just like separating, the success versus the effort and the job. But I mean, to your point, right? I know a lot of people who I'm part service military and you are as well. And we see those people that never pick up any other identity other than being that guy who served,
Yeah.
and like you see them at all the outings, right? And it's like the guy who peaked in high school, right? And they still go to the high school events wearing the Leatherman jacket and all that stuff, And it like I used to just kind of like look at those people and be like, huh. But now through all this work, it's like, like they didn't have another container to put themselves into and didn't do the work to just be okay being themselves, right? And like yeah, this is probably a little crunchy for like some people who were kind of newer on their path and but if you don't do this work, like,
Hmm.
oh my God, you're gonna bail the second it gets tough and it's gonna get tough. Like business
Hmm.
isn't easy, so you're gonna have to figure some stuff out. And the first thing you gotta figure out is yourself. But I
Hmm.
went from being this person who was like always out and networking and always trying to be the sales guy that everyone thought that I should be and who I thought I should be to being this kind of like very okay being an introverted guy and staying at home a lot and being really okay with it. But now, like I look back at that time and I appreciate it. But during the time, it was you're just trying to kind of keep moving forward and stuff. When you were going through that time, how did you do this? Like, were you journaling? Were you GPTing to yourself? Like how did you work on this and kind of like work your way through it? Do you have any tips or tricks for anybody who might be hearing this and might be struggling with some of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I worked a lot on several different things. A few things I found worked were, I was having trouble sleeping, falling asleep and staying asleep. And part of that was the racing thoughts at night, not
Hmm.
unable to quiet my brain. And so what I did was, and I didn't learn this from anyone, I just kind of did it uh, once, and then it worked really well and kept doing it and kept working. But I would have a notebook on the side, like next to my bed where I was sleeping, and I would just essentially free write and brain dump onto that notepad when I crawled into bed. Um, and I would go until I stopped. And sometimes that was a minute, and I would write like 5 words, and sometimes it was an hour. But I would write and write and write. And the only rule that I had for what I wrote was that I had to throw it away when I was done.
Oh yeah, I have the same.
And
Yeah.
roll it up, ball it up, and throw it away. I don't care how good the idea seemed. I don't care how clear the to-do list was. I don't care how insightful anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was a piece of trash that I was dumping into the trash can, but it was mentally me dumping my head trash onto a piece of paper and
Yep.
then balling it up, literally rip it off, ball it up, throw it away. That helped me a lot with sleep, but it also helped me recognize that, like, it let me take my thoughts less seriously. And I think that was more important than the sleep over the long run because, like, I struggle with depression and PTSD. Like, it is a thing that I have. And if you allow the things that you think or the feelings that lead to thoughts or the thoughts that lead to feelings to be true and real every single moment they come up, right? Even though you have no control over them,
Yeah.
and they never stop, then that becomes a very difficult place to operate from. You feel kind of trapped in your own mind. But when you recognize that it's just like air, it's just like the breeze, and it goes back and forth, and it does depend on your mood, it does depend on your sleep, it does depend on your, like, how healthy, how unhealthy, whatever. It's it's
Mm-hmm.
it's just a natural phenomenon of your mind, and you take it less seriously, then it holds less weight for
Yep.
me anyway. And so that alone was huge. It's funny how frustrating it can be when something simple that other people, like, you've heard from other people,
Yeah.
uh, works so well that
Mm-hmm.
you get mad about it.
Oh yeah.
Like this shouldn't work as well as it works, and I'm frustrated that it does because this feels bigger than something that this small thing could fix. Um, but Gary Halbert got, talk about the,
One
copywriting,
of the greats.
right? He had this concept called road work, where, if you read his boron letters to his son Bond, he talks about doing your road work, which is basically just walking, or, running. And John Carlton also calls it like like, no, no sorry, someone calls it he calls it your stupid human trick, but that's like for a talent. But there's a thing that John Carlton also brings up is like, be a good animal.
Oh.
Um, all of that to say, those are just copywriters. It's been said by other philosophies, but like, if you kind of treat yourself like a pet that needs water and food and exercise, that you just don't really think about taking your dog for a walk. You don't think about, like, making sure that they're taken care
Yep.
of, but we don't do that for ourselves. I found that walking a lot, making sure that I was hydrated, making sure that I was doing all those kinds of things, the very small, idiotically simple, frustrating things were actually very helpful, in the sense that, and I'll say this too, for me personally, may be different for others. I did not feel better when I did them. What I did was not feel as bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, so if I'm at 0, I had to recognize that 0 was better than -10.
Yeah.
And sometimes I did things that made me feel 10, right? That weren't good, that would put me back to -10 later.
Mm-hmm.
And that took a minute for me to even recognize that that was powerful. But and I hate to be that guy who's like, yeah, just journal and walk, bro. But it
I mean, dude, thank you for saying that it's infuriating whenever it's like too easy, right? Because like
mhm.
my sales coach was like, "Hey, you need a journal," and I was
Yeah,
like, "No, I don't. Shut up." Right? Like,
yeah,
and I was mad about it,
yeah,
and it was one of those things to where I'm like, well, people should journal, but other people should. I'm probably okay, right? And I
hmm,
didn't realize the hypocrisy in it. And then I started a journal because finally I was like, okay, I'm going to prove to you that it's not that helpful. And then
hmm,
it ended up being pretty helpful. But I
yeah,
was still kind of doing it on the basis of it being like a thing that other entrepreneurs do, right? Like I'm listening to the Tim Ferriss show and all these business podcasts and everything, and everyone journals and everyone talks about what a game changer it is. So I'm doing it and it's helping, but I'd stopped doing it because it started to feel like it wasn't all that helpful. And then during COVID, I started to journal again, right? And I was kind of like, okay, I read this article and this person was saying a PC and a Mac are the same bits of silicone and plastic. The thing that makes them different is how they are coded, right? The language that they use. And that just got through all my walls and all my guards. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then I took like kind of like your thing of like the free flowing thing, as well as like just trying to put it into a situation that is actually helpful. And I kind of combined the morning page thing, which is just like free flowing thought, to kind of
Hmm.
beat back the critic, as well as, I'm big on questions, right? You will improve based upon the quality of the questions you ask yourself is something a coach said to me. And it was very frustrating at the time, but now I just see the greatness of it.
Hmm.
And so my journaling habit during COVID was just a stream of questions, right? And most of them I never even answered, but it was very helpful at seeing as how I was kind of painting myself into corners. But it was also like taking it off road and doing it for myself, not for, the people on the shows or to have a cool thing to talk about, one day and everything else like that. So, but it is one of those things of like, okay, you know, it is annoyingly easy, right? And it's super easy to be like, it's not going to help me because, with both like journaling and meditation, I think are two of the hardest habits to really kind of build, because how you realize your improvement there isn't frustratingly slow, right? And if you go into it trying to do it for the improvement, you don't get any of the greatness that comes from any of that stuff, right? You just have to choose to do it because let's just see what happens, right?
Hmm.
But if you're doing it so you can be more mindful or more detached or like, you're never going to get there,
Hmm.
which is just such an interesting thing. But I love that thing is like, it is frustrating, right, to look back,
Yeah.
right? Because I tell everybody, I'm like, you should just journal, and everyone's like, and I'm like, I get it. I hated that advice whenever it was being handed to me, but like nothing has paid off as big as developing that habit in my meditation habit personally, you
Yeah.
know. But it's got to be for yourself, it can't be for anybody else.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things we were talking about as we were kind of like thinking about where to take the show is you were talking about there's so much cool opportunity in the form of business and what they're made for and how they work and everything. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's so exciting for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember this. So, um, one of the things that I've always struggled with was that I wouldn't call myself like a purebred entrepreneur, or like a natural, right? I wanted to be career military, and
Mm,
through a series of events decided to go into the National Guard instead of the active duty, and then kind of figure out what I was doing with my life when I wasn't career.
mhm,
And so I stumbled into this thing, like stumbled into marketing, stumbled into business, stumbled into copywriting, and just kind of built it from there, right? So I think the benefit is that if I'm not a purebred, then I'm not the kind of person that all the courses and books and stuff are written for.
mhm,
I don't resonate with the like go crush dominate and like grind personally, right? But I also don't resonate with what I would consider to be the prime directive of the entire concept of capitalism and business, which is generate shareholder value, like maximize profits.
mhm,
So the system has the fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value within the organization, and the entire system is maximizing profit,
yep,
right? But profit is made up. It is literally an abstraction from the concept of value and production that we have labeled as profit and put as a currency or put as a monetary like symbol.
mhm,
It doesn't exist in real life. It exists on a piece of paper in an abstract in people's minds. So if the system is optimizing for an abstract that doesn't exist in real life, naturally the system is going to optimize for the abstract at the expense of real life, which is why you see a lot of stuff at the highest level where no value, quote unquote, no productivity, quote unquote, has been created, even though profit has been created, right? It's the classic example of a venture capitalist who goes and buys, buys 10 laundromats for $1 million each. So he has $10 million worth of laundromats, and then he installs a digital card reader instead of a coin collector at each one. And now they are a software company that's worth 20x.
mhm,
So it's a $200 million laundromat business or whatever. No value has been created there, but profit has been created there because the way the system works,
mhm,
right? So I noticed that, and I kind of always was like, there's no room for philosophy in this, like in this business world, because nobody gives a shit. But at the same time, I started noticing that no, there's a lot of people who are in this thing because they are creators, they are producers, they want to provide value, they
Mm-hmm.
feel good when they make something or do something for another person that has value, right? But like I said, value and productivity is not the same as profit. And so what I noticed was a little bit of a discrepancy between the people who could provide the most value or were the most productive versus the people who were the most profitable. And I'm like, that's a feature, not a bug in this system, right? Like that's how the system is designed. Every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets.
Mm-hmm.
So people say the system is broken. No, the system is working exactly as it is intended. It is
Yeah.
built for this. Um, but enough people with enough drive to create and provide value and produce exist with the idea that that can be a different way of doing business, because business is just a transaction between people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're improving on some sort of resource, whether it's time, energy, or some sort of natural resource, and you're providing that value and then improvement to somebody else in exchange for something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
um and all that to say, a lot of technology now and a lot of the communication and a lot of all that has enabled a person who cares more about value and productivity than profit to actually like make enough profit to survive and to thrive. So I'm fascinated by all the different ways that that is the case. And, you know, when we talked before, it was like there's B corporations.
Mm-hmm.
So a corporation whose fiduciary responsibility is not to maximize profit and shareholder value, as instead to maximize the benefit that they are mandated to.
Yeah.
501(c) organizations that are tax exempt but have a productive or value creation aspect to them, where they are not profit motivated, they are value oriented, they
Mm-hmm.
are mandated to do something else. Government, where, you know, I am not a big government person, but I am a person that understands that government ultimately is just a group of people who've come together and decided that it would be better to operate together as a group and pool resources than it is to operate by ourselves in a state of nature. And so taking those resources and applying them to the group in a better way, like grants for small businesses who are creating certain types of things. Like the way that the Department of Energy or some of the departments will give easements for farms to have natural areas so that natural flora and fauna can come back in. There's all these examples of things that are not profit oriented at all
Mm-hmm.
that are massively beneficial for people, for everyone involved, actually. And that's what gets me really excited,
Yeah.
is that there is this undercurrent of people who want to create in that way, but the technology has enabled those people to do more with way less and get further and connect with more people who are like-minded, versus in the past, it's been very siloed. It's been almost impossible to find and connect with people who believe the same thing or are doing the same things.
Yeah.
And so between the internet and between some of the AI tools, between some of the technology that's now spreading, there's this layer of people who are like, damn, I can do that. I don't know how to code, but now I can.
Yep.
I don't know how to write copy and persuade someone, but now I can. Um, I don't know how to do chemistry, but now I can.
Mm-hmm.
And that enabling factor combined with the people who actually produce value and productivity is super exciting for me. Like that seems like the undercurrent of the future.
Man, I love that because, you know, the whole time that I was like selling in corporate and selling for bigger organizations and everything, I would come in and then I would leave, right? I liked the money, but I hated the kind of zero sum environment and that very old school version of sales and take no prisoners and all of that stuff, especially after being in the military. I'm like, we should not in any way, shape, or form trying to make this into that because they're not the same. And yeah, I'll fight with anybody who wants to talk about that, you know, sales has got to be a war. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. But, you know, for me, like that whole time I was seeing these people that I kind of despised, right? And they were at the top of these things. And so between that and like sitcoms and everything else, that we're kind of surrounded, I was like, oh, well, like, if you're going to go make a bunch of money, you're probably going to be a bad person,
Hmm.
and it wasn't until I started to get into small business, right? And meet really like passionate people that were fueled by other things, and money was just like a crowbar, right? It was just a lever, right? It wasn't the end all be all. It wasn't how they were keeping score and everything. And this was like flooring to me, right? Because like this is when I was going through like working with my sales coach. We're doing a lot of awareness work, and a lot of the journaling was starting to come in and everything. And I'm competitive, but I don't need to win at your loss, right? So this always made me kind of like an odd person out on sales teams and stuff, right? Because I can remember one time I didn't make a pitch on a pre-approval to a widow who already had 2 credit cards. And when I asked her about the cards, she was like, "Well, they were my husband's. They're just there for emergencies. I never use them at all." Okay, cool. I'm not going to pitch you on the pre-approval, right? Like it just doesn't it didn't make any sense to me. But as soon as she's out the door, my manager's in my cube like, "Hey, why didn't you make the pitch?" Right? And I hated all of that, And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I got to this like smaller lane and doing the work that I do now to where it's like there are certain situations to where being, discerning of like, is this a good fit really, really, really matter? And that's kind of like where I focus on the things that I focus on now, right? Because like in certain situations, if you're just selling like a phone or a hard product, yeah, put it in their hands, sell it to them, enjoy the return policy, right? That's what it's there for. But like if you're selling creative work or something that's very complex or custom or something else like this, right? There's stakes to bringing on bad fits. And I was just selling in areas that didn't really appreciate that for a very long time. But then I found it, and now I really appreciate it. I love all the B Corp stuff. I love whenever nonprofits can find a way of like, not just endlessly needing donations, right? There's a bunch of cool ways of getting it done. Changing gears a little bit, right? We talked about a thing on the call about this, and I was so excited to talk a little bit more about it. And this comes from awareness, but you said that a lot of people, they're not even sure of their own purpose of why they're doing
Hmm.
the business that they're getting into and stuff like that. I don't want to ruin the conversation about this, but can you talk a little bit more about like the awareness and the we help people within X do Y within Z kind of time frame, and where some of that kind of starts to fall apart? I said,
Right.
what's going to get you weird looks in a group of entrepreneurs if you're just sharing your hot takes?
Yes. My response to that was to literally try to put myself in a group of entrepreneurs mentally and like say something that would make them feel awkward. Not on purpose, but like what have I done in the past that kind of like made the conversation weird?
Hmm.
And I recognize that usually the conversation gets weird when someone says something or says something like, "Yeah, I want to make a million millionaires," or when I ask a question like, "Why? Why do you want to do that?" Or "I'm building this business." Okay, why are you building that business? And the joke was that very often there isn't an answer to that question.
Yep.
Um, Sometimes the first answer to that question is like, "Yeah, I'm building an agency." And I'm like, "Okay, well, why are you building an agency?" And they're like, "Well, because I want to make a million millionaires." And that's kind of like their default thing that they've been trained to say.
Hmm.
But if you go deep, meaning like one more layer, if you ask why again, or if you ask why a third time, then ultimately people get really, really awkward because there isn't an answer,
Hmm.
or the answer is something that they don't really want to say out loud, which is like, "I just want to make money, bro.
Yeah.
Like I
Hmm.
just want to be rich. I want to be filthy rich, and I want to spend it on all the shit that like they told me I could never have because fuck them."
Hmm.
Right? And the conversation that we were having about this is like, okay, I'd rather work with that. I'd rather have that be the premise, or that be the honest response,
Yeah.
because I do feel like there's a lot of hand waviness to your purpose and your why
Hmm.
behind business, and it's designed to impress people at these cocktail parties. Like, I want to make a million millionaires. Like, okay, you want to be you want to make $1 trillion in value. Why? Why? And then I said, well, if you said a million millionaires because the guy before you said 500,000 millionaires, then you don't actually want to make a million millionaires. You want to beat that guy. Like you're competitive. That's your why,
Yep.
right? And you just want to be the best. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at someone and going, I want to beat you, right? Because I'm competitive. Now, there is the tallest tower thing where, like, do you want to build the tallest tower by building the tallest tower? Or do you want to build the tallest tower by tearing everybody else's tower down?
Yeah.
And there is something to be said about that. But the awkwardness to that is that so many people either know and don't want to say it out loud because it's not polite,
Yep.
or don't know, like don't actually know that that's the thing that's motivating them or driving them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both of those are kind of concerning, because if you know and you don't want to say, then you're automatically hiding and lacking a level of integrity in your actions,
Yep.
right? I don't care if it's a really like altruistic motive. If you don't want to share it with anybody because you're afraid of being judged, then that is hiding it a little bit.
Yep.
But also, I think more importantly, if you're hiding it from yourself, then you're not engaging the power that you would have if you did have that awareness. If you are just owning the fact that you are a super competitive dude, and every time you see someone doing something that you want to do, that you think you could do better, you get motivated to go do that thing better, then cool, man. Like, we need people like that.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage you to go build a tall tower instead of ripping everybody else's down, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, and you're making it up because you want to sound good at the cocktail party, then you're completely cutting yourself off at the knees, right?
Agreed.
Like you're not engaging with a reason why. You're performing a reason why. And the joke was like, people watched the Simon Sinek Find Your Why video and then made up the biggest, hairiest goal that they could find so that they could have an answer at the cocktail party. But I don't want to shit on anybody. I think it's fun to joke about, but the truth of the question, and like, why is it awkward? That why, that real drive, the real reason, if it's honest, is your most powerful motivator. Like,
Yep.
it will sustain you when other things will not. And if you truly wake up in the morning and the first thing you see when you wake up is like a million millionaires on the ceiling, and you pray to that every morning and go, that is what I really want to do, then great. But I haven't ever met a person who actually thinks that.
Man. So first of all, most of my conversations before sales training included me asking why too many times and like putting people under that kind of pressure. But then there was also this phase of my life to where I would meet people who I couldn't believe that why was their why, right? So like I would hear some of these things, right? Because like I worked in banking and finance and I was meeting business owners and stuff like this before this. And they would be like, well, like I just really like helping. And I'd be like, come on, right? So if anything, I was so sold on the idea that you couldn't be in a space like this just because you were passionate and you had a purpose and you were very caring about it. I thought that was all a front, But then doing all this like identity work with my coach and everything, man, like money's not motivating to me. Being at the top of the leaderboard isn't motivating to me. Learning and helping other people, those are my biggest motivators, right? And when I'm zeroed in onto those things, man, get out of my way, right? But if I was trying to do this on like faulty scaffolding that, someone else had sold me on, I wouldn't be here, right? Like I would have flamed out a long time ago, And so you've got to be like really open and honest with yourself. Now, I think there's something really cool about taking a wordless purpose, right, or passion, and encapsulating it into kind of like a goal. I think that's really helpful when you're working with a team and everything. But if it's all on false scaffolding, right, something that we're trying to sell ourselves on, it has no chance of actually like helping a team stay motivated because it's not even real.
Yeah.
Oh man, such a cool conversation, dude. Thank you so much. Gonna switch gears now into the rapid fire questions. Okay. So
All right, let's roll.
And this is an interesting one. I was trying to think about the best way to talk about this. For someone who is starting today and they're thinking about marketing, messaging, copy, all of these things, okay, what is the advice you would give someone who's starting out now with all these tools and all these systems, and someone who's spent a lot of time there and has ultimately moved away from like making that their main craft? How would you coach someone who's going out and starting today?
Okay. Rapid fire question. So I won't try to go down a rabbit hole here, but
Sure.
immediately I ask, okay, what are you starting? Like, if you're just starting, quote unquote, anything, then it's kind of like the Cheshire Cat asking Alice, like, where are you going? And she says, I don't know. Then it doesn't matter which way you go. But there's also some silly truth to that. Like, if you're just starting out because you have this fire of, I need to do something different or I need to do something, period, then yeah, just go do shit. Like, do literally anything. Like, like, you can't see it out of the corner now, but go grab a guitar and go busk on the street. Like, you never done that before. That's cool. I don't know. Go volunteer somewhere. But if you're talking more specifically about like they're starting a business or they're a founder, right?
Hmm.
They're building a thing, then messaging and copywriting right now, the fundamentals of human communication and behavior have not changed. We are people who talk to people, and generally, people like to talk to people, especially if the person they're talking to has similar interests or has their best interest in mind. And so, if you understand that there are principles of human communication and persuasion that exist, learning those is helpful.
Hmm.
But I have this whole article that I wrote a long time ago that I basically said newbies should not learn the fundamentals, should not learn the first principles. And you'll probably appreciate this as a martial artist. Uh, if you teach someone the fundamental of the punch
Hmm.
without having them punch 1,000 times, they
Yep.
are not going to be able to punch, no matter
100%.
how good they are describing the punch. And so knowing that principles of persuasion exists is helpful and learning them is helpful, but only with the context of practice, lots and lots and lots of practice.
Oh
And
my
so
God. Yeah.
a founder who starts out right now, my recommendation would be talk to as many potential customers or leads as humanly possible with zero agenda other than figuring out what they care about, what they hate, what they're currently doing, and what they wish they could do, but, comma, and then you fill in that blank. Those four things will make you as much money as you would ever want in any industry ever.
Absolutely.
Because all you're doing as a business owner is solving other people's problems,
Yep.
whether it's a service or a product or whatever.
Hmm.
And so those things are what people will tell you and care about. And then you can decide how you are going to help provide value to those people or not.
I love that, man. I
Mhm.
like, being a sales guy and carrying around like the sales title and everything. I run into that whole, well, I don't want to manipulate people and stuff like this, right? And there's
Mhm.
this very tangled view of persuasion versus manipulation, and people kind of lump them all together and they don't want any of that. And it's like, well, if you're not going to rise to the occasion and understand how people communicate and this is about them and not about your own preferences, you're dead in the water anyway.
Yeah.
Like fundamentally, like you're not like those are all the people that come to me like 12 months too late. And then they're like, hey, John, can you teach me how to overcome this objection? Well, if you had built something that people were actually asking for, you wouldn't have all these objections, right? The whole
Yeah.
process would be so much easier.
Yeah.
But people get caught up in that. I love that. Okay, second question. What is the piece of advice that you see on social media, right, that you can appreciate now, but you had to learn it the hard way yourself?
Oh, man. Have a hard time narrowing down. So I'll probably pick like the most popular, I guess, internet marketing socially dude right now, which is Alex Hormozy.
Yep.
He's got this thing of like putting in the reps and just doing a lot of volume. I think that that is, in general, really good advice. It's frustrating because it's, again, too simple.
Mhm.
And I think it lacks context because uh, people who just do reps and are not doing a process of what's called deliberate learning,
Mhm.
which is its own thing. I think you can Google it. I might be
Yeah, intentional practice. Yeah.
intentional practice. Yes. Yeah. Intentional practice, deliberate learning. You can Google the specifics of it, but it's a process of constantly being a little uncomfortable in the process. And that is the learning process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just doing the reps, it's doing good reps that you suck at and that you progressively get better at. But that advice that is being given and has been given is generally the best advice,
Mm-hmm.
because the what you get from it is something that you cannot buy or you cannot learn in a book, which is context.
Yeah.
And context is the thing that will change the game for anybody who's actually doing or building something.
Yeah. Well said. Like in going back to the martial arts thing, and this kind of ties into the thing we were talking about a second ago. My teacher had this line that when you give a student a technique before they're ready for it, it becomes a crutch,
Hmm.
right? And so then you look at all these volume driven things, whether it's content or sales reps or punching or anything else like this, right? There is a level of like, okay, well, let's just go do 100 punches and like we're going to be better at the end of it. But while that is true, right? Like, you could do 10 punches and be really thinking about your elbow placement and your wrist placement and all these things, right? Like, what's another word I could put here as opposed to the word that is easily coming to mind, and all of these little things, right? But intentional practice is such a game changer, but much like you, I see that stuff and I see people just talking about volume, 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 and it's like, well, it bothers me because I can appreciate the nuance of it as well. And it's like, I mean, I'm a coach and I've been coached. And so, trying to find the fastest way of improvement is kind of like part of how I approach everything now. And that thing bothers me a lot because it's like, okay, like the whole 10,000 hours thing, right? Like Anders Ericsson felt so misquoted by that. He went and wrote his own book around the idea that it's only 10,000 hours if you're just autopiloting everything. It doesn't have to be that long or arduous, but you have to care. You have to be thinking about it. You have to create feedback loops so that way you're not lying to
Hmm.
yourself and everything. Oh, God, I could talk about that for forever.
Yeah.
Last question, Lucas, and then I'll let you get on with your day. Thank you so much for doing this.
This is fun.
Um, what is your word of warning for someone who's starting today?
Oh, man. Um, FOMO.
What do you mean?
FOMO stands for fear of missing out.
Mhm.
Fear of missing out is what will kill you today. Uh, I think that people are like, the pace of change is so fast, with the implication that they're trying to keep up. You can't. It's not that some people are and you're not, and you need to work harder. It is impossible mathematically to keep up with everything that is changing right now in the world, in technology, in business, in the industry that you're in. It is impossible. If you look at the sheer amount of information that is published on a daily basis, and then multiply that by how much that information changes previously published information,
Yep.
and how much context you need to interpret that information for your circumstance, and then realize it's going to happen again tomorrow with a greater quantity of information,
Yeah.
you recognize it is impossible, not just improbable or not just you're not working hard enough, but impossible to keep up with the pace of change. And so FOMO, the idea that you are missing out on something, will create a sense of um, extreme urgency and anxiety that will lower your cognitive ability in real time and lower your ability to recover from the effort that you put in, and lower your ability to process short and long-term memory. So you will get even further behind something that you could never possibly keep up with. And you will miss the things that you can actually do in the moment that will improve your circumstance. And so right now we have an entire culture of keeping up with and trying to know, and FOMO and urgency that if you get caught up in it will kill you.
Mhm.
Probably literally, but definitely figuratively from what you're trying to do. And so the fix to that or the word of warning is FOMO, like don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But the way to survive FOMO is to recognize that you are in a river. That river is flowing at a certain speed. You cannot control the speed of the river. All you can do is control your place in the river,
Mm-hmm.
and to get comfortable with how you are maneuvering in the environment that you find yourself. By understanding that, you stop fighting against the current. You stop trying to swim with it to go faster. You stop, and instead you recognize, okay, I have to understand that I am flowing in this river. Now what? And you can make decisions from there. So that's the best advice I can give in answer to the warning.
Man, I love that. I've spent a lot of time fighting the current as opposed to just like letting, in the version that I heard of it was like you're on one bank and there's the river and you're trying to go straight across the bank, right? There's not anything all that bad about going this way, like with the current, right? And having some energy for whatever happens on the other side of that river. Read a lot of like Alan Watts and stuff like this, like on my martial arts journey and everything, and read a lot of philosophy now. And yeah, just don't fight the current, right? Like, kind of be okay with things being outside of your control and stuff. Man, this is so cool. Lucas, if people want to stay up with you, right, during this pivot and kind of see what you're going to be working on next, is there a place that they can like keep up with you? Are you doing like a newsletter? Are you
Yeah.
are you out in the world loudly currently? Or are you keeping everything under wraps while you're in the middle of figuring it out?
I'm not keeping it under wraps, but I'm also not making a specific point to publish everything that I'm doing.
Okay.
So I think the best way to keep up with things would be either to follow me on Facebook directly. My name Lucas Fisher, and I have one of those professional profiles, so not the
Oh,
page. And or if you want to like follow up with the reading, you can follow me on Substack. Again, Lucas Fisher's Substack.
awesome, dude. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, this is awesome.
This is one of these episodes to where like I'm going to be humming the rest of the day, right? And I hope that, whenever people are listening to this, that they've got some time and some space to really kind of like sit with these ideas because I think the longer you can sit with them, the more helpful they're going to be. But thank you so much for coming on and doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, I appreciate you having it on.